right, let's go ahead and dive on in, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Chamber's fifth joint webinar of the 8-part series with DeVry University. For those of you who I have not met or do not know me, my name is Natalie Layton, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Chamber's Vice President of Membership. We have an excellent webinar today to discuss how to empower collaboration, I would say. A guide to engaging across generations. So with that, let's get on with some brief housekeeping before I introduce our presenter. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be distributed to our participants, membership, and available on our YouTube page as well. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature, which can be found on the bottom icon bar of your screen. Our presenter, Laura Knapp, will be able to answer questions as they're asked. And we would also like to encourage everyone to use the chat box as well to interact with your presenter or myself throughout the presentation or webinar, I should say. You can also use the raise hand feature, which is also on the icon bar if you would like to speak and ask your questions verbally during the presentation. And if you would like to know about membership in the Chamber, just send me a quick note in the chat box and I will follow up. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenter, Laura Knapp. Laura is the Center Dean at DeVry University and its Keller Graduate School of Management in Long Beach, joining the school at the end of 2016. She's a Southern California native and longtime Long Beach resident, having lived in Bixby Knolls and California Heights neighborhoods in Long Beach for over the past 20 years. She earned her Bachelor's of Arts at Cal State Long Beach and MBA at USC's Marshall School. She's a member of the Long Beach Rotary, the LB Chamber, Toastmasters, and is the current chair of the South Coast Higher Education Council. She's incredibly passionate about education, which equips graduates to make a difference in fast-growing sectors of the economy. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us again, and I am going to hand the reins over to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Natalie. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you definitely to the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce for sort of co-hosting this series of webinars, mainly around professional growth topics. And so I hope they're very valuable to you and to the members and to hopefully the future members of the Long Beach Chamber. I am the Center Dean at DeVry University and its Keller Graduate School of Management here in Long Beach. And I'm excited to bring this webinar to you today. It's about empowering collaboration. And it's the kind of collaboration that I think we need to see more of necessarily across generations. Why? We currently have 4 generations of people in the workplace today. And while I know companies value diversity, and there's research showing that diverse workforces create better decisions and are able to address problems better, there can be challenges too, right? And they're the same with generational, generations being in the workplace. There can be challenges just in terms of communication. And so we're gonna go through this concept today and share with you just what those differences are, right, and why they matter. And I mentioned diversity, right, is so key. 85% of enterprises agree that diversity definitely results in the most innovative ideas. According to research, the more diverse an organization, really the more they're able to see challenges from different perspectives. And research shows that they're more apt to be successful in moving into new markets. Why? Because they have so many different perspectives. So you're moving into a new market, you have more knowledge that you can tap into, right? They are more apt to provide, higher share value. They are more apt to have higher employee retention and overall satisfaction in the workplace. So bottom line, the greater the diversity, the greater the breadth of strengths available, and the ability to come up with the most innovative ideas. That's good, right? Whether you're a small business owner, even if you're an individual, practitioner, you have clients likely that are coming from different generational, cohorts. Definitely, if you're working in a large organization, a company or a nonprofit, you're going to see these different generations at work, and being able to tap into those strengths and avoid the collisions is, I think, the key and what we're going to dig into today, hopefully with some good ideas for you to take away. So yeah, lots of diversity out there. And, I mean, just ranging from communication styles, the types of differences we see amongst, or between the generations is sort of just a different approach to work, interaction with management, how they like to be led, response to criticism or praise or any sort of feedback, right? Depending on the generation, you may see differences. Being a team player versus being a very independent contributor, you may see differences across the generations. Approach to work and managing projects or managing work. Some generations are just really innately good at multitasking, for example, and some people are going to be very questioning, and skeptical about anything assigned to them. Okay, so these are just some of the differences you're going to see among these generations. Work-life balance, how people value, their family time and balancing that with work also varies generation to generation. Okay, so not sure you knew, about all of these nuances. We're going to dig into these nuances deeper, within this presentation. So why does all of this matter? And maybe you're saying, okay, Laura, that's great. I know there are differences. Diversity is a good thing. You just said that. So what's the problem, or is there a problem? Well, unfortunately, according to research, more than 1 in 3 people waste 5 or more hours each week, 12% of their work week, due to chronic, unaddressed conflict between colleagues from different generations. This is something that's been researched apparently, and we've come to the conclusion that there is an inefficiency at work due to unaddressed conflict. And maybe we just don't, understand necessarily where that conflict is coming from. Maybe it's just that a lack of understanding. We think, what, we're all in the same team. We're all in the same organization or on the same team. We're all, we all have the same goals, right? Like, why don't we all just get along? And the thing is, innately, and due to many different factors that we're going to go over, well, we'll go over some of them, but, the culture, world events, just the demographics of each cohort, really hundreds of things go into making up a so-called generation, and those are all, kind of different ingredients per se that lead to a different perspective. So just innately, people are going to look at work a little bit differently. So the manager or the leader or the business owner, right, or the entrepreneur that understands these nuances can better address them and can better reduce, kind of get past that conflict or those misunderstandings that take so long sometimes to work out. Okay. Feel free to chat any comments you have, and I'm going to have Natalie sort of keep an eye on the chat. I actually, for some reason, don't have access to it right now, so it's not on my visual screen. So Natalie, keep an eye on chat. I would love to leverage chat during this webinar. I would love to hear your feedback, any challenges that you all have faced, okay? Any ideas that you have, in hand to help all of us, right? So feel free to chat with us, and Natalie, feel free to interrupt me if you see anything good in there, any good questions. This is our agenda. So I'm going to define the generations, those 4 generations at work, in a broad scope. We actually have an exercise. If you have pen and paper handy or something to jot down some notes, I have a 5-question quiz, and we are going to evaluate your generational work style, okay? Because, depending on when you were born, probably you align more or less to those generalizations, but also depending on whether maybe you were a cusper, or maybe depending on the people that you work with or other influences, you may actually identify with a different generation. And so that's important to know. Okay, we're going to talk about generational differences in working with colleagues or in managing different colleagues from different generations. Maybe we're managing somebody that is a generation above us, right? That's happening a lot. Millennials are in the workforce and, making their impact, and they're managing, and they may have people in different generations. So what does that look like? how can we effectively collaborate a bit more? So I'm going to have some ideas for you in terms of approach. All right, so the 4 generations that are at work today, and you've probably seen this, and there is a growing body of evidence and research around these generations and how best to work with them and to collaborate. They are the baby boomers, okay, Gen X, the millennials, and Generation Edge, which is also called Generation Z, okay, or Zoomers. Some people call them Zoomers. These are, the young folks that are just coming into the workforce now. Okay, baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. Okay, what shaped this generation, in very large terms? High profile assassinations of JFK and Dr. Martin Luther King, right? The Vietnam War, the civil rights protests and demonstrations, women's rights, okay? So this is a very, very interesting generation. Lots of key events, very memorable events. Somehow I always think of things in terms of music. I don't know. And I think of groups, I think of the Beatles, I don't know, Elvis Presley, what else? Rolling Stones, feel free to chat any of those. I think of those bands, those groups. Music was very influential, right? So the baby boomers, Generation X, born 1965 to 1981. And depending on the research that you see, some of these dates, they merge or there's overlap, but roughly speaking, 1965 to 1981, key events here shaping up this generation. Actually, this is the first generation with a huge proportion or percentage of latchkey, childhoods. For whatever reason, the economy shifted significantly, and many kids were sort of forced to become independent at a very early age, and there wasn't that, I guess, that network or that net of after school programs, at least that I can recall. There are now, right? There's a lot of resources and this net developing around schools and things like that. But back in the day, no, you got your key and you went home after school and you opened up for yourself. And that was that. Tearing down the Berlin Wall. Does anybody remember that? Okay, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. I remember that. MTV, Desert Storm. My older brother participated. He was in the Army and he was in Desert Storm 1. So yeah, I remember that. Rising divorce rates. This is something new, creating a bit more, maybe insecurity, right? Moving right along. Who's next? Millennials, big cohort, born 1982 through the early 2000s, let's say, roughly speaking. And this generation very much shaped by these events here on this slide. 9/11, right? I remember 9/11, but I was maybe, older and already working. And yes, it was impactful, but I think a little bit younger, if you were just starting out, this was something incredibly impactful. The rise of the internet, having parents, that were able to protect the millennials to a certain extent with busy planned lives. And they always talked about, helicopter parents. That was the thing in the news, the helicopter parents, just really protecting this generation and jumping in, when they need to, but also very stressful events like Columbine, the rise of those school shootings. Oh my gosh, so big cohort, definitely making its impact right now in the professional world, right? Who's coming up after the millennials? Okay, this is Generation Edge, and depending on the research, again, you're going to see either Generation Edge, think of an edginess, or I think more commonly, actually, these are called Generation Z. I asked my daughter, I'm like, are you Generation Edge or Z? She's like, I've never heard of Generation Edge. But think of that. Think of Generation Edge or edgy, key events shaping their lives. And they're born, early 2000s. Some people say 1995. But anyway, let's say early 2000s, roughly through around 2015, 2017, key events shaping their lives. Great Recession, blended families, cultures, ethnicities. Okay, these are kids that are very, very comfortable in, a blended, very diverse community, right? They see it within and among their own families. Social media explosion, right? If anyone has kids in this cohort. It's all about that social media. That's where they get their news, in fact. Tech explosion for sure, underlying everything. And I've seen it even, within my own daughter's life, and she comments on it. She's like, wow, it kind of, you could see this huge evolution in terms of technology and apps and everything, even her going from a youngster into her teenage years. Unfortunately, yeah, and I don't know if it's actually more violence and terrorism, but it seems like it's more apparent. It seems like it's out there, and maybe that's a function of the news media. I'm not sure, right? I haven't looked into that research, but just a real awareness, let's say, of unprecedented amounts of violence and terrorism, domestic, international. And so there's this, let's say, a certain edge, right? And realism, that this generation Z is bringing to the workplace. So your work generation, where do you belong? So you've done, the math, you probably already know what generation you belong to, but we're talking about work generations, okay? And there are differences, again, as I mentioned, in how to approach work. And sometimes, as I alluded to, that can vary depending on maybe where you were born within that cohort, or who you're working with a lot. Maybe you're a Gen Xer, but you happen to work with a lot of baby boomers and you've adopted, some of those characteristics per se. So this is where we're going to do a quick exercise. I hope you do have a pen and paper. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, okay, to determine your work attitude, let's say your work style. So if you have questions, here's question number 1 on our quiz. If you have a question about a work task that you've been assigned, would you prefer to leave your boss a voicemail asking for clarification on that task? Would you rather have a face-to-face conversation with your boss? Would you just go ahead and Google your question and see if you can find something, online that would answer your question quicker? Would you just text your boss, right? You have your boss in your phone. This is text, that's going to be the quickest solution. Okay, A, B, C, or D. Question number 2, when it comes to work-life balance, okay, so life outside of work and work. A, I want better work-life balance, but I do feel a lot of guilt if I think I'm neglecting either one of the two, either my family or my job. I get into that guilt mode. I'm not working hard enough, or I'm not, being present enough. I obviously would love to have more work-life balance, but it can be a struggle. B, my work ethic demands 100% commitment to my job. Whether I have a family or not, my work ethic dictates to me that I do need to be 100% committed, to my work. C, I love what I do and gain satisfaction and fulfillment from my contributions at work. In fact, kind of that balance is found within work, at work. D, I'll quit a job. I will leave. I'll say no more to a job that's too demanding and does not allow for an acceptable, appropriate work-life balance. I'll actually say adios. Okay. A, B, C, or D. Moving right along to question number 3. If I have the choice, I prefer to work as part of a team with a focus on achieving a long-range vision. B, in an independent environment where my contributions are recognized and valued. C, in a collaborative environment where I'm encouraged to reach my goals. Or D, in an environment that's diverse and inclusive with recognition of unique contributions to the team. Okay. Question number 4, when it comes to the use of technology at work, I was brought up with it and I thrive on the challenge of learning new systems and software. B, I see the value in it from an efficiency standpoint, but feel a little overwhelmed by all of it. C, I look to the future and I'm happy to adapt to the technological changes that continue to present themselves. And D is cut off, so I'm going to read it. I feel comfortable with it and prefer information at my fingertips via the internet. Okay. A, B, C, or D. And then question number 5, my generation has been unfairly stereotyped as A, difficult to manage because we work to live, not live to work. B, workaholics. C, tech obsessed and lacking in interpersonal and social skills. D, impatient, lazy, and requiring instant gratification. Okay, and of course, these are unfair stereotypes. These are kind of negative biases, but if you've heard this about your generation, I guess what have you heard about your generation, right? So let's add up the responses. Okay, if your answers were mostly or all A's, you actually identify with Generation X. Okay, B's, you identify, whether you are or not, with baby boomers. C's, you identify with Generation Z. And D's would be you identify with millennials. Okay, so is anybody surprised, I guess, by their results? Any surprises there? Are you who you thought you were? Does it line up very well with who you thought you were? Or is it a bit different? I know in the past, depending on, and it's almost like when I take, when I take this little quiz myself, sometimes it does vary from my own, I guess, natural generation, Generation X, but it can go either way for whatever reason. Sometimes I identify more with a millennial kind of attitude and sometimes with a baby boomer approach as well. So I've seen it run the gamut. And I think a quiz like this is important. Why? Because here we are talking about stereotypes, we are talking about generalizations, but guess what? At the end of the day, everyone is an individual, and ages, they say age is just a number. And I would keep that in mind as we are managing, different generations at work. Yes, there is research that shows that there are differences in approach and in style and communication preferences, et cetera. Yet at the end of the day, right, everyone is an individual with their own upbringing and with their own attitudes and potentially different approaches than you would imagine. Okay, especially if you are a cusper. Okay, so a cusper is somebody who straddles kind of the line between two generations. And most cuspers do have a natural ability to identify with the two generations, obviously, that they straddle. So depending on your year of birth, you may be sort of in between, let's just say. Okay. Now I'm going to dig into more detail, okay, regarding, I guess, the characteristics, the attitudes, the likes, the dislikes of each generation at work. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I have some ideas on how best to leverage, right, the unique talents and experiences and perspectives of each generation. And, I'm going to share with you kind of the preferences that are going to make each generation, in general, a bit happier, a bit more comfortable, right, contributing at work, if that makes sense. So baby boomers are known for being optimistic. Actually, they have, of the generations, they have the most positive regard for authority and hierarchy now within the workplace. But you got to balance this. Going back to that civil unrest, right, and those protests. At the same time, they want to make sure that their insight and their input is being taken into account. Okay. So they're okay with hierarchy, but they don't want necessarily a top down, do this, do that. Okay. They want to know that there's a collaborative approach. There's a team, a democratic approach, a participative leadership style. Okay. Where you're getting them on the same page. They tend to have a very good and strong work ethic. It is what it is, but the work ethic does tend to really, really be there. Okay. If we think of a baby boomer, a leader, and I don't know if she's a household name, but I'm doing some research on Ginny Rometty. She has been the CEO at IBM up until just recently, up until the end of 2020. And brilliant lady, right? Brilliant computer science person. She made so much headway with IBM, from it being a very staid and kind of old-fashioned organization focused on hardware, to moving them into the future of the cloud and artificial intelligence. I mean, that took a lot. And she is known, actually, Ginny Rometty, for her democratic leadership style. Okay, so very democratic, appreciating diversity in the organization, appreciating feedback, and allowing teams and groups to sort of, come up with ideas themselves and really make decisions by consensus. Okay, so she's really known for this trait, Ginny Rometty, baby boomer, right? Of course. If you find yourself working with a Ginny Rometty, right? Maybe they're retiring, maybe not yet, maybe they're volunteering with your organization, maybe they're on the board, right? Maybe you're working with them side to side or managing them. I would say you're going to want to appreciate and acknowledge the skill and experience they have to offer, because it's deep. Okay, it's pretty deep at this point. You're going to recognize that they are hardworking and career focused. In a way, I don't want, take this as a positive, right? Take this as an advantage. Okay, you're going to want to value their dedication, their loyalty, and their life experience that they bring to the job. And you're going to want to respect, make sure they know that you respect their contributions. Okay. The boomers enjoyed the prosperity of their traditionalist parents, and maybe that's why they are just, kind of inherently, happy folks, right? With that strong work ethic, more on the collaborative part. They also, being such a huge cohort, they entered the public school system kind of en masse, and they were forced to really collaborate and share and work as a team, in order to succeed. So I think those are some of the nuances, right, that we maybe see reflected among the boomers. So boomers can definitely help you navigate challenges. And so I think tapping into their expertise and letting them know that you appreciate them, right, and their experience is going to be key. Okay, in terms of their own preferences around these 4 areas, mainly I'm going to talk about communication styles, work environment, and leadership. In terms of communication, they really appreciate it, a two-way communication and a personalized communication, right? They want to know that you know them, that that you care, right, who they are. They want to know that they're making a difference. Traditional ways to communicate, I guess modes of communication, are okay. By that, I mean leaving a voicemail message is okay. Okay, they're going to listen to it. I know people who just never listen to voicemails. They'll listen. They'll leave you voicemails too. Okay, so I hope you're listening to those. A phone call is perfectly fine. Of course, email is perfectly fine. So by this, I just mean, traditional communication modes are absolutely fine. The work environment, they love an environment that is team oriented and, again, democratic. Okay, they do want to have the opportunity to lead, and they really appreciate a vision driven team or organization. Okay, so if you're struggling at all, you want to make sure that that vision is there and very clear and clarified, right? So they can glom onto that and make headway with that. Okay, but overall, team orientation is fantastic. In terms of leadership, they do appreciate, and this is according to research, friendly kind of people. And again, that consensual or participative leadership. You're going to want to get to know them. You're going to want to have them on your team, share with them everything, and take their input, take that into account. Okay, so a democratic leadership style is, works very well. Okay. Moving right along, and feel free, any questions, let Natalie know via chat, and I'm happy to answer them at the end, or we can address them during this presentation. Let's move on. Gen Xers. Okay, Gen Xers, and I alluded a little bit to their background. It's estimated that 40% of Gen X kids overall were latchkey kids. So they grew up to be very independent. It is what it is. They had to be. Also skeptical of authority, and not a huge fan of authority. And so for this reason, I think they have been called in the past, rightly or wrongly, maybe a little bit difficult to manage. Why? And it's not that they're not going to respect authority, it's just that it has to be earned, right? It has to be earned. They highly value competence. They love to see somebody who is achieving results, if that makes sense, and somebody who is highly incompetent, or highly competent rather. Incompetence is really going to be their pet peeve. Okay. They do have, and this is the thing that we can maybe capitalize on more, right? They have a strong desire to make individual contributions. They can be good team players, but I would say they're a bit iconoclastic, maybe. And again, very generalizing. They want to make their unique entrepreneurial kind of do-it-yourself contribution to the team. Very entrepreneurial, and they want that entrepreneurial input to be valued and rewarded. Okay, so it's not that they're not team players, but it's nice to be able to tap into them and into their unique perspectives and ideas and make good use of it. Why not? Gen Xers actually, and I don't know if this is because in general, again, speaking of childhoods, the latchkey situation, they highly, highly, highly value work-life balance. Okay, if they have a family at home, they're going to want to make sure that they're taking the time, that they have the time and the balance to be able to tend to that family and spend time with their family. Okay, so they strive for a very, very strong work-life balance. It's said that Gen Xers don't value achievement necessarily for achievement's sake. Okay, so something to keep in mind, right? Something to keep in mind. So yeah, working with Gen Xers, here's how we can work together and make the most of it. You're going to want to benefit from their do-it-yourself attitude and entrepreneurial spirit. They embrace change, right? They're not stuck in their ways by any, sense. So they do embrace change. They're okay with it. They'll run with it. So don't be afraid, of presenting them with change in the workplace. Make sure that you do show respect for their family and their work-life balance. Okay, that is going to be critical. And they love a flexible workplace, and they're okay with very constructive feedback, right? They value honesty as well as that, competence. They want honesty, right? And so if you have feedback for them, you don't need to couch it too much. You can be blunt. You can be very straightforward. In fact, they value straightforward communication. Okay. So yes, in terms of their preferences along these aspects, communication with Gen Xers can and should be very direct. It can be straightforward. It can be to the point. Okay. It can be electronic, right? Text is fine. They actually prefer electronic communication for whatever reason. Email and text, perfectly fine. Maybe communicating being via DM or what have you. Their work environment should be flexible. They like it to be informal and autonomous. Okay. Their attitude, again, in general, is like, I can get this done if you let me do it. Give me the time, give me a little bit of time. I don't have to be, have a ton of FaceTime. I can get this done. I'm going to get it done my own way, possibly, but they will get it done. And they do appreciate opportunities for growth and development. In terms of leadership, they actually see their manager as a mentor, or they idealize, right? They want their manager to be more of a mentor than anything, somebody genuine, somebody very competent, flexible, results oriented, but who can also, help that Gen Xer achieve more, at the workplace, right? By investing in them and showing, them how they can grow and develop. They actually, and this is funny, schmoozing doesn't work, in general, again, with Gen Xers, that schmoozing kind of thing. They just want everything very, straight and to the point, using time poorly, any incompetence. They hate bureaucracy. They just want things to get done. Okay, so interesting, right? Let's move on. Okay, let's move on to the millennials. Big cohort, right? Big cohort, making a very, positive difference. They're in the workplace now. I don't know if you ever watched, TED Talk, Simon Sinek. he talks a lot about millennials, and sometimes I feel like, I don't know, I think he has very good insights, very good advice. I don't know if he's 100% correct, but if you ever catch Simon Sinek talking about millennials, I don't know, I think he has good advice for millennials and also for their employers, right? Also for their employers and for organizations today, who employ millennials. So in general, millennials are hopeful, they are realistic, right? Actually, they're quite different from the Gen Xers, as they're called sort of a protected generation, right? Their parents were there. So very different experience growing up. And so while Gen Xers like to fly solo, millennials get excited about the camaraderie that can take place at work, right? They crave community and a sense of belonging, right? They expect regular collaboration with bosses and colleagues and look to connect informally and develop real friendships at work. Many millennials value the way technology can help them stay connected, collaborating, for work and also with their colleagues. So they really appreciate technology and the way it connects them. If I think of a millennial leader, it's funny, I think of Mark Zuckerberg. Okay. And if you think about it, oh my gosh, Facebook, he put together this huge and thriving company based on connecting people. So millennials they like to connect, they like to be connected, they like to stay in touch. In a way, Facebook was genius, and I know they're going through some issues right now with some of their features, but I mean, really, the goal with Facebook was to connect people, family members, friends. Their groups were meant to connect people with, various different hobbies or what have you. And so, to me, he's like the quintessential millennial entrepreneur. Okay, just helping people to connect. You know what? And I forgot to mention the quintessential Gen X CEO or leader, and I would say that would be Elon Musk. If you wanted to think of somebody, if you're managing Elon Musk, maybe before he got famous, how would you manage him? Keep that in mind as you're managing Gen Xers. And then with millennials, right? Going back to millennials, you'll want to appreciate that they are definitely tech savvy. They adapt intuitively to new technologies, right? They recognize the value in their ability to multitask. They're actually very, very good multitaskers. Okay. This is what Simon Sinek talks about. They have an impatience. Some people say it's a requirement or an expectation of instant gratification. I don't know if this is true or not. In a lot of ways, maybe that impatience is good for businesses, right? If they're coming in and saying, this is too slow, that is too slow, is that not valuable feedback to maybe up our game in terms of customer service or in product development and what have you? In a way, let's use that impatience. Oftentimes our customers have that same impatience and requirement for instant gratification. So I think treating that with respect is something to keep in mind, right? They do value achievement. Okay, so they are creative, they are productive, they do value achievement, at the workplace and beyond. Okay, so in terms of preferences at work, in terms of communication, work environment, they do want and expect a very positive, collaborative communication. Okay, anything sort of cynical or sarcastic or pessimistic or, it just doesn't resonate, right? It just doesn't get anywhere. And so keeping the communication positive, and that doesn't mean that you can't be honest, right, with somebody's performance, because they are achievement oriented. They want to achieve, right? They want to make things happen. And so if there is a performance issue, it is better just to coach them to those goals. Be honest, don't sugarcoat it, but coach the millennial, to achieve those goals. Millennials are great to reach via text, via their mobile phone, right? Again, they're loving technology, and they appreciate state-of-the-art technology at the workplace. For them, they want their work environment to be future-oriented, right? And achievement-oriented, but also customizable allowing to work with the technology that they love. So customization, kind of a flexibility, but also a very future focus. They do appreciate feedback, more so than maybe those Gen Xers who are like, I'm good, I'm set. They do appreciate feedback in real time, actually. So checking in with them often is appreciated. Okay. They're not keen on a hugely hierarchical structure, right? They like a relaxed environment, kind of a fun environment. As their leader, again, coach them to their goals, help them to stay on track, be motivational, be supportive, keep the two-way communication and that open door, policy going. Okay, collaboration is very, very key for this generation. Okay. Moving right along to Gen Z or Gen Edge, right? Talked about that edge and some of the factors contributing to that edginess. Really on the positive, the Gen Zers are very resilient and very resourceful. Yes, they've been exposed to a lot, via those social media channels. Yes, they know about the school shootings and all sorts of terrible things, right? That said, they are resilient, they are resourceful. It doesn't mean, though, that they're not stressed. Okay. Yes, they're resilient, but they also, according to a recent, recent research, I think it was up to 95% of Gen Zers reported feeling stressed out. Okay, feeling stressed out because of, what have you. So that stress is there. It's something to keep in mind. That said, they're somehow, bouncing back. Gen Edgers are very inclusive. They accept differences. This is something wonderful. They tend to be poised and self-confident. They come across, as very able and capable. Okay. They're committed to their belief that there's no one right way to do things or one way to be or to act. And they are very entrepreneurial. Okay. Some research is showing that Gen Zers are actually showing some of the traits of the boomers or even the traditionalists before the boomers, i.e., hard work, financial frugality, right? So they're embracing some of these older, ways of being or preferences, but again, are very tech savvy and forward thinking, even more so than some of the recent generations. Making a difference in the world is important to Gen Zers, right? They want to have an impact. They want to make a difference, right? These young people are now entering the workforce. Okay, they're coming in right now. If I were to think of a Gen Zer, feel free to share with me any ideas that you have, but I think, is it Greta Thunberg, right? Gen Z. So she wants to make an impact, right? She wants to make that difference. Okay. So think of, I guess, a Greta Thunberg if you were managing her, on your team. Okay. Working with Gen Edgers or Gen Zers, you're going to want to respect their commitment to diversity and inclusion in their lives and in the workplace as well. Definitely you'll want to appreciate their ability to cope, manage, and move on from difficulties. That said, I have read research where they say it's important to have, to share with Gen Zers strategies to cope with stress. Okay. And so if that's something, or maybe through your benefits program, if that's something you can raise to the fore, that will be very important. Know that they potentially also need guidance in interpersonal relationships outside of technology, right? And this is something I see, even with my daughter, I'm like, wow, they're on Zoom all day long for school. How many conversations, how many real conversations are they having, with people? And obviously we, really focus on that at home, but there's almost this move away from, the need to have, really deep interpersonal relationships outside of technology. And so that's something in the workplace there's maybe an opportunity there that we can help with. Okay. So moving right along in terms of preferences, right? Communication. can be very realistic, okay? Very realistic and open-minded. They're visually oriented and tech obsessed, right? So there may not be a very good interpersonal communication skill there. And you're just going to want to recognize that. It's not that they're being difficult or rude or what have you. It's just that it hasn't been developed possibly as well as it could have been. That said, they're very eager online learners, right? If you have online learning platforms or any continuing education or anything you can put them in front of, they can learn it online. Okay, they're okay with that modality. They're confident in that modality. They excel, in fact, in a work environment that is tech confident, where technology is integrated into processes and supports innovation. Again, they embrace diversity and inclusion, believing a richer global perspective and wider social circle will enhance their ability to learn and grow and positively impact job results. They want to ensure they're making a difference. So please make it known, I guess, give them avenues that they can pursue. And also, it's very important for them to know that your company values people as well as profit. Okay, so they highly value people and diversity and making a difference. Make sure it's known that your organization has those same values, right? If you're going to gain the trust of these Gen Zers. As a leader to Gen Zers, you'll want to model maturity and professionalism. Go ahead and connect with these youngers consistently using tech tools to help them meet job expectations. That said, they require possibly a little bit less helicoptering, or real hands-on, day-to-day feedback, right? They're a little bit more independent, but they do expect sort of that constant digital connectivity, okay? All right, so what generation, I'm just curious, what generations is everybody working with? Feel free to share in the chat. What generations are you seeing at work, right? Who are you working with? On the team or managing, or maybe your clients, okay? Future clients, feel free to share in the chat. Is it all 4 of these? Is it just, kind of relegated to 1 or 2? I'm trying to think, definitely in higher education, we might even be seeing 5 generations, right? Because there are still some of the faculty, right, that were born, in even before the baby boomers, right? Some of these men and women who are so expert at what they do and what they teach. And I didn't dive into the traditionalists, but that is a generation that we see, in higher education, and I'm sure, in other areas as well, and in terms of students, the students have already been coming in, the Gen Zers, and are applying, for sort of that entry level work, right? So I think I'm gifted to see 5 generations at work at this point. Anybody else?
It looks like we have, Mary Ellen says lots of millennials. So she's working with a lot of 1982 to 2000 babies.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I mean, in a way, how shall I say, it could make it a bit easier, right? If you're working with a lot of one similar generation, it can make it easier because you get it down, what's expected, it's sort of an easier time for the manager, perhaps. Okay. Yet when you are working with multiple, and not to say, we need to customize a leadership tactic for each and every person, right? Because you don't want to beg the question, like, are we, is there sort of some age discrimination going on, right? How come he's treated this way and she's treated that way? I don't get it. I think at the end of the day, clear expectations have to be set if you are working with multiple generations, but also, and I do have some comments actually published in the Harvard Business Review. I'll get to that in just a sec. But I think a custom approach is apt, right? If anybody's taken like the DISC communications assessment, right? We know that we're all different, even within a generation, right? We're all so different in terms of our communication preferences, in terms of our, Clifton strengths. in terms of our talents, our strengths, maybe our Myers-Briggs. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, people are individuals, no matter. And so I think having that sensitivity to the individual is what helps make a transformational leader, really succeed, and really at the end of the day, yeah, see the growth that they want to see among their employees and within their company. So yeah, this quote kind of sums it up. Go ahead.
She did add that, Mary Ellen, she said, I'm a boomer, so it's a challenge.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, there are differences. And I think just understanding what those differences are and proceeding accordingly, and self-adjusting. And that's exactly what, the DISC assessment is about. It's like once you understand how somebody else communicates or where they're coming from, then we can adjust. And it's not about, not being ourselves, but it's about creating a bridge so that people can even, get the information that we're trying to share with them, and proceed to really excel with that information, right? So at the end of the day, yes, we all have to coexist in the organizational culture. So understanding what drives each generation is it really is the first step towards professional peace and productivity. Well said. Very well said. So understanding what drives the generations, I think, is kind of the goal, of this presentation. And I was looking at some research published in the Harvard Business Review. And what they said is yeah, okay, so if you have multiple generations that you're managing, what do? Are you customizing your approach to each person? Yes and no. What they recommend is actually to start by, yes, we want to be aware of differences. Okay. It's the first step. We just saw that on the slide. We don't want to dwell on the minutia of those differences in a negative way. Does that make sense? You don't want to dwell on it. These stereotypes are useful. I guess they're very useful to know, but at the end of the day, you got to take them with a grain of salt. You have to move beyond the labels and understand the individual. Okay, so it's an investment. It's definitely an emotional and physical and energetic investment to get to know people a little bit more, understanding these labels, I guess, and the generational differences, but taking them also with a grain of salt. Okay, we have to build collaborative relationships. So the mindset should be to make the person that you manage your partner and involve them in everything you do. You're still the boss. Yes, you are the one making the decisions, but you should hear people out. Okay. And I think this works across the board. Make the people you manage, no matter their age, your partner. Clue them in to the decisions that you're making. Get their input. Study your employees. 3, study your employees. Understand their demographics, right? Understand the projected demographics, right? Who the next generations of your future workforce are, to determine what they want out of their jobs, right? This does differ generation to generation. So become a student, right? Become a student of these individuals, and these generations. And 4, create opportunities for cross-generational mentoring. Okay, at the last webinar, we talked about the importance of having a mentor, and I went through like different flavors of different styles of mentors that you can have. Guess what? A new mentorship program is being seen more and more at the workplace, and that is called reverse or reciprocal, where a younger person is paired with somebody more seasoned and experienced. Okay, and obviously the more seasoned person is helping the younger person kind of, understand how to achieve, what's required, right? Work on specific business objectives. And then the younger person who grew up with the internet, that could be a millennial, that could be a Gen Zer, teaches or acquaints the older generational, person about the power of social media, perhaps to drive business results. Okay, so it's a back and forth. I'm going to help you understand a little bit more about, these social media platforms, and you're going to share with me institutional knowledge to help make me more successful at work. Okay, so reverse or reciprocal. Keep an eye on those programs, right? If not, if you're able to institute something like that at work, would be fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted you to all know that there is a tuition reduction through the chamber if you are a member or soon to be member. If you wanted to study human resources or business management at the undergraduate or graduate level, you can do that with a discount through the chamber. I also can customize training and have our faculty lead it at your organization or your place of work. So happy to talk about that with you a little bit more. I have a couple more events coming up in the month of February, and I have the same strange animation, but this is a list, and we'll send it to you via email as well. So 3 more webinars coming up. I hope you can join. And I also, if you don't mind, Natalie, I have a very cool event. I just wanted to promote a little bit. Our CEO of DeVry and Keller, Tom Monahan, is interviewing one of our Keller graduates, Keller Graduate School of Management graduates, Wilbur Yu, who is the CEO of a marketing agency that really took off. He got over 1,000 clients in 8 years, and he'll be interviewed by our own CEO tomorrow at 10 a.m. So we're going to send you the link. It's a LinkedIn Live. It's free. It's just fun. I would love for you to participate. It'd be great. Thank you so much for your attention, for your questions, for your feedback. I really appreciate you. I hope you're getting out there with the new, I guess, less restrictions out there, and taking advantage of all that outdoor dining, right? Thank you so much. Thanks, Natalie. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you for everyone for joining us. We greatly appreciate DeVry's partnership with this series. It's been a wonderful series. And like Laura said, there are 3 more. So make sure you tune back in next week on Wednesday, the 10th at 10 a.m. We're going to talk about time management strategies, the power of focus. And that's free to our members and $10 for all of our future members. So make sure you come back in, and there will be 2 more after that. This is an 8-part series. We're very lucky to have partnered with DeVry during this series. So thank you so much. And it looks like you just have resounding thank yous in the chat box. I checked to see if anyone had any questions, but everyone is just very appreciative, just like I am. So thank you, Laura.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thanks, everyone. My contact information is on the screen. It'll be sent out as well. Feel free to be in touch with anything. I appreciate you all. I appreciate the chamber. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.